begin, and I'll also record. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started, Stephen. So welcome all to All Life is Yoga, which is being hosted by the LaGrasse Center here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. My name is Rade, and I am being joined by my colleague Vladimir Yatsenko. All Life is Yoga is a series of discussions and talks and interviews that are focused on the transformation of consciousness and its reflection in all aspects of our life, be it relationships or family or work or even spiritual pursuits. Over the past several months, our focus has been on the spiritual arts and sciences of India. We have hosted experts in the field of Vastu, which is the Indian system of architecture, Hasta, the Indian hand-reading system, Jyotisha, better known as Vedic Astrology, and Ayurveda, an Indian health and healing system. During these talks, our speakers have highlighted the interconnection and synergy between these ancient Vedic sciences. And today we continue this theme with Stephen Highburger, who will address two system sciences, Ayurveda and Vedic astrology. Stephen has been deeply immersed in Vedic studies since the 90s and is a teacher of Vedic astrology, Ayurveda, Indian handwriting, Vastu, and even Sanskrit. He has studied intensively with a master of Vedic traditions, Hart Defoe, and is a graduate of the Ayurvedic Institute of New Mexico, where he spent 4 years studying classical Ayurveda under the direction of Dr. Vasant Lad. He now resides in San Rafael, California, where he maintains a very, very, very busy consultation practice. Stephen has been one of my teachers in Vedic astrology and a very dear and longtime friend of Vladimir's and mine. So we are very deeply honored and excited to be hosting Stephen today. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of the hour. So please, throughout this talk, feel free at any time to type your questions to Stephen in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat. And Stephen, I know that you no doubt have prepared probably a very engaging presentation on Ayurveda and Vedic astrology.
I hope so.
We do too. But before you begin, I'm wondering if you would share with us just a bit of your personal journey. I'm curious what originally drew you to these Vedic sciences and what impact or influence they have had in your own personal life.
Well, we could spend the whole of the hour speaking about that. Let the PowerPoint presentation go. But to surmise and bring this into focus is to say that I was a traveler. And my brother and I traveled about the world. And I became what was known as a super host. You see, I was so good everywhere I went, I picked up every bug that I could find, you see. And therefore, I had some health issues, you see, that needed to be addressed. And I went to Western medicine and I tried my best to find my answers there and couldn't. And so I started studying natural medicine, and I was living in Europe. And for many years, I was an immigrant living in Northern Europe in Denmark. And after many, many, many moons, many years of studying as much as I could, someone just happened to drop a book into my hand, and it was Dr. Vasant Lad's little book, the first little red book on Ayurveda, the science of life, and it was in Danish. Within 30 minutes of reading that thing, I looked and I just said, this is the mother of natural medicine. This is the mother of healing. And from then, it just took me a matter of a short period to make my way to, I thought I would go to India and study, but this was back in the 90s, and there was no real way at that point that seemed logical. And then I discovered, of course, I could go just simply to the Ayurvedic Institute. So I went there thinking that I was going to just study Ayurveda, but within a very, very short time, within a month or two, I met my mentor, Mr. Hart Defoe, who gave me a Vedic astrology reading. And for the first time in my life, I really felt like that I was seen. Something really clicked deep inside me. And so I started studying, and within a couple of years, he asked me if I would like to help him to teach, to apprentice, and so forth. I did that. Then we came to California and opened up the Vedic Vidya Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit out here. And so I spent a decade living next door to my mentor until they departed. And so the studies have continued, and then I've continued to teach on my own. So that's at least part of the journey.
But thank you for that. And just so Sanskrit and palmistry also studied under Hartefo, or not?
Indeed. In fact, here at the Vedic Vidya Institute, we taught all of those. With Penny Farrow was also here. Many of us were here. And yes, because Hartefo was teaching Vastu, as well as Sanskrit, as well as Jyotish, as well as Yoga Sutra. And of course, there's Mantriji, which is his guru, my Guruji, who passed away a few years ago, who also was still teaching to a group. A friend of mine had a community in Toronto, so I would spend time there also with him. And then also with Hartji, we would travel up to Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, where we used to go, and Hart would teach there, and I would help him on occasions. And we went to Swami Dayananda's ashram, and so we studied Vedanta there. So there was it was a busy time, very, very busy time.
Very blessed with gurus in your life.
Indeed. So I will give thanks. I'll have in the PowerPoint. I will definitely show my gratitude.
Okay. Well, you can go ahead and screen share what you like. We really appreciate that personal sharing and knowing a little bit about your background and how you came to these sciences.
Sure. Well, of course, there's so much more, but so it is. We have a short time. I've got more than enough planned. So let us proceed. And yeah, let me just share the screen.
And I'll just remind everyone again, while Steve is getting ready, to post any of your questions in the Q&A box, and we will at least get to a few of them towards the end of his talk. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Radhe. And thank you, Vladimir. It's a pleasure being here. So, Ayurveda and Jyotish, huge subjects, each one of them. So bear with me. I will skim over the top of some things, try to give a little bit of an understanding, a little bit of a background to contextualize things, try to bob and weave my way into how that these two are synthesized innately with each other. And then we'll come out the other end with some principles to look at, or at least one very important principle to look at in terms of combining these two together in the practice of Vedic astrology, or what is called Jyotisha. So to begin, typically we do a mantra, but I will allow that to pass at this stage, simply because we are not able to chant together. So let us begin by giving gratitude to, I want to give gratitude to my teachers, all of us, to the Vedic Sampradaya and its masters. So as I was saying, Mr. Hartefo is my mentor, and his guru, Mr. Kale Mantri, who's also my guru. Swami Dayananda, as I was just speaking about, a master of Vedanta, and of course, Dr. Vasant Lad, who I spent many years with in New Mexico, who I thought was one of the great inspirers in my life. It gave me great insight into what it is to be in a body. I'd like to start with the Vedic vision, or at least some thoughts on the Vedic vision. So in this way, I've said we are nature and nature is us. So it is true that when we look at the images, we can see similarities, you see, in the way that we move, in the way that we are, and that if we look closely enough, we'll see that in fact, each animal that we see in this world has tremendous similarities with each other. And not only that, but even there are similarities that run in all of nature here on this planet. So the Vedic vision is, as I would say it, is to know this and to live in harmony with it. But there's also even what I would call a larger vision. And the larger vision is one that yata pinde tata brahmande, yata brahmande tata pinde. So this quote from the Ayurveda, of course, Vladimir could probably tell us the verse, but I can't. But it is that as in the individual, so it is in the universe, or as it is in the universe, so it is in the individual, or as we might know it in English, as above, so below. But I mean, that gets to it, but there's more there really, because if we think of this as so in the smaller, the compact, thus in the egg of the Brahma's egg, or the egg of Brahma, the expanding egg of Brahma, the cosmos. Right? And if we look at the images, of course, from things that grow on this planet, and we look at the way it is that a galaxy is formed, a fingerprint on our own human body, the way it is that a baby looks in the womb, and the way that plants also look when they begin to grow and to be born, all have these similarities, right? And we can look at the conch, and it is an uncanny similarity, you see, in this way to the galaxies that we see. This idea is a fractal kind of theme. And this idea is one that we are all one body, and that there is no separation between the two, the self within the cosmos within the self, because behind it, the Vedic vision is one of self-knowledge. The idea that there is what we might call today a unified field is super important. But if it is a unified field and we become deeply philosophical, then maybe one might say, well, so what about Ayurveda? Or what about Jyotisha? What about, quote, Vedic astrology? Why have these things? Everything is Maya. Everything is illusion. Why have these things? Well, because anything in this world, even though we might say that behind everything is oneness, satyam, and that has a need, or that needs a support from something else, is nityam, as we say in Vedanta. That nityam, that state that we are in, is constantly being realized, constantly growing. And we are part of that. And therefore, that is something, because often I'll have students ask me, so why did this ever begin? If it is all a totality, why did it begin? And I said, well, it's not, you're not living in delusion. In fact, this is real because it is the experience of consciousness. It's the experience of consciousness in a body and in this world. So we need Ayurveda to sustain us, to sustain the body and the mind while we're on this path of discovery. It helps with our consistent drive in our spiritual life to integrate the small self with the large self. And this is a journey that happens inside and outside, and also within an ever-changing environment. Because it's ever-changing, we all need a helping hand along the way to keep us balanced, obviously. So I'd like to just quickly say that Ayurveda and Jyotish, the origins are out of the Veda. The quick on it, out of the four Veda, Atharva Veda. You can say Ayurveda comes from this. It isn't what's technically called an Upaveda. Some also go to the Rig Veda, but most of the time people speak about the Atharva Veda. But Ayurveda it even has Veda, of course, in the name. But Jyotisha, many people do not understand is that there are the Vedanga, the 6 limbs of the Veda, which are used to understand, to work with, to manage the pithy nature of the Veda. And one of those, the 6th Vedanga here, is Jyotisha, which is the astronomy and the astrology of India, which we're here to speak about, along with Ayurveda. And Jyotish quickly has 6 limbs as well. The one that most of you know is Jataka, which is birth horoscopy. But there are multiple limbs. The first 2 have to do with the astronomical part and the observational, you see. So you have observational, you have astronomy, and then you have mathematics in terms of Ganita, and these 2 together give us the ability to what we'll talk about later, the ability to track time, to be able to put time and space, which really is consciousness, to put it into an order, to put it into a map. But birth horoscopy, Jataka is one part. There's Prashna, there's Muhurta, and then there's Nimitta. Nimitta is where Hasta, any type of Lakshana Shastra, reading the signs and symbols on the body, comes from this. But Muhurta, a huge particular subject that I know Radhe is also very, very interested in, which is picking auspicious moments for things. And we'll come back to that too. But probably Muhurta is the root, the source of all astrologies of the world, because it's about understanding, again, our role as per the small versus the large, our organization of our mind and our culture in order to put ourselves into sync with the cosmos. And there is the Veda, the truth that cannot be displaced by another truth. Ayurveda, as I said earlier, when I picked up that first book by Dr. Vasant Lad, I thought, this is the mother. Right? And indeed, through time, I'm not trying to in any way undermine any other systems of medicine. And Ayurveda is a sort of also a very big umbrella, because there are actually many, many different versions of medicine, Siddha medicine, Unani, these kinds of things in India, right? So, but if you can take it this way, when I'm talking about this, I mean the indigenous medicine of, let's say, South Asia, but let's just say the indigenous medicine of the world. So it is indeed the mother of healing, but what is it that makes it that, or what is it that when we talk about being healthy, what is healthy? So in Ayurveda, one thing that is said is that swastha, to be swastha, right, is to be in balance, to be, quote, healthy. But what does it mean? Well, swastha, to self-abiding, to stand in the self, to be rooted in the self, being in oneself, being in one's own natural state, being oneself uninjured, unmolested, contented, doing well, sound, or lastly, healthy. Well, what is said is that for that state in Ayurveda, the ideal is that there's a balance, a perfect balance, if you will, or perfect operation of what are called the 3 dosha, the 7 dhatu, and the 3 mala. Now, those are the humors of the body, vata, pitta, and kapha, which are made of the elements. When those are in balance, swastha can be there. When the sapta dhatu, or the 7 tissues, are in balance, and these we're going to talk about later, rasa, rakta, mamsa, meda, asti, maja, shukra, and artava, which relate to the plasma, the red blood, muscle, fat, bone, nerves, and reproductive. It's a different viewpoint in the Ayurveda system. It's a brilliant viewpoint. Just like there's 5 elements instead of whatever the 130 or whatever it is now plus elements. It was about coming back to the essence, understanding the essence and building blocks, because when you understand that, then you can work out from the essence to multiplicity. right? As opposed to working continually in the land of multiplicity. And the trimala are, of course, the wastes of the body, urine, feces, and sweat. So when all of these are working in balance, when all of these are functioning well with each other, then there is swastha. Now, because of this, when we speak about vata, pitta, and kapha, many of you know that as an individual, you can have more vata or more pitta or more kapha, and it's a unique balance. Right? Well, that unique balance we call your prakriti, or your constitution. And that, because it is unique, because it is not in that sense universal, it means that there's like a thumbprint of you. It speaks to karma. And because it speaks to karma, what I mean by that is that the idea is that as we move, we are a bundle of actions. We are actions, a bundle of actions which turn to a bundle of results. Right? Charaka Samhita is one of the seminal works on Ayurveda, one of the great texts, one of at least 3 great texts in Ayurveda. And in there, it is stated that the 4 bhutas, these are the elements, are derived from past deeds. So therefore, if the elements make the doshas, you see, if the elements are from past deeds, your dosha, in other words, your constitution, that uniqueness of you comes from past deeds, which have merged with the self. It enters into the fetus because the self, with seed-like character, always transmigrates itself from one body to the other. According to past deeds or karma, one's form arises from the past form and mind from the past mind. So when we read this, we understand that right now we can see how it is that Ayurveda and Jyotisha wind together, because Jyotisha is going to be seen as a map of karma. Jyotisha is all about time and all about delineating karma. How? Through a reading of the environment which we find ourselves in, either at the birth or in every single moment. Because every moment is a birth. Now, Jyotisha is indeed an ancient tradition along with all of it. They were never separate. Right? As I said, it's the astrology and the astronomy of India, never separate from the culture, never separate from the religion. Right? In fact, inextricably woven in with all rituals, because Jyotisha, as a Vedanga, are the eyes, you see, of the Veda, and would tell when ritual should be done. And all the way the calendar system was set up is because Jyotisha is the astrology and the astronomy of India. So indeed, it is also a premier tool, as I was saying, to map the ebb and the flow of karma and the movement of time. Jyotisha, or Jyotish, often people drop the A on it, is translated as the knowledge of light or the science of light, which we'll come back to in just a moment. And of course, Jyotisha and Ayurveda are sister sciences, and in this way have always been employed side by side. But saying that is to say that whenever we are thinking about this in terms of India, we think, oh, okay, that's great. But what about in other societies or in our own kind of Western society, in ancient science and medicine? What about astrology there? Well, for the medicine of India, said to be the father of Western medicine is Hippocrates, right? Of course. And I will give you a quote, which I give to my Ayurveda students, when I'm teaching at those places. The quote is, "He who does not understand astrology is not a doctor, but a fool." Oh, what a statement coming from, right, the father of Western medicine. Right? You see, it's been separated out in time now, and that is because of religion. You see, in the West, but in the past, you see, famous astronomers and scientists, and in ancient science, it was always part of their formal education. Right? It was always that astrology was always taught as part of a classic education. Right? And the likes of Ptolemy, Galileo, Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, Leonardo da Vinci, and many more, they were all what? Astrologers as well. This is something I put in just because often in the West, we forget this, that it wasn't up until just very recent times, just a few hundred years ago, right, that this was actually so. So things have changed. And, in India, of course, Jyotish is still in some ways a part of everyone's life, or a lot of people's lives. Please forgive me. Don't mean to include everyone. All right. So what I want to do, though, is come back to Jyotish here as Jyotisha, as light. So briefly said, because this idea, this is again a large topic, a beautiful topic to think about. We'll just taste it a little, and to say Jyotisha, learned of light, wise of light, the science of light. But when we really get behind that and think about light, about what light truly is, well, the light is consciousness. The light, when we go into our inner light, Jyotish is as much about culturing the inner ability to see as it is the outer ability to track the movements of the heaven, the lights above, right? And in this way, the wisdom, if you will, of light is to understand light as something that must be in movement, and that light itself, in terms of the sun, the way it is that it comes and it gives us the starlight, it gives us warmth, and in fact, it is the reason for life, and it fills our bodies with life. So we're studying life from two different angles when we think about Jyotisha and think about Ayurveda. So what about in Ayurveda? Well, you see Agni in this way, fire, whether we think of fire as being outside the body or fire inside the body, it is the power of transformation. And that is the reason that I believe all of us are here today, is because we're all looking to understand the process of our own transformation and to empower ourselves and others to be better, to be stronger, right, in transformation. So in this way, if we watch a star burn, right, it can give life. Or if we watch a fire move through the California forests these days, where I am, we are also in awe of its power, of its transformational power. But also, you see, the very body, the essence of what we are, the elements is all from stars, all from the core of stars, all this transformation from stars. And in this way, on Earth, every plant will track, to some degree, it will track the sun, and through photosynthesis, it turns that itself into energy. And then what? Our parents ate those very plants, and that is what gave us the energy to be born. In fact, we were born of light. And it's all in this way a transformational process. The question becomes now, if we, again, with Ayurveda, it is said that there are some 40 types of Agni. Now, depending upon who you're talking to, that number may change. But this central fire, the core, what's called Jataragni, right, and Bhumi Agni of the liver, these two, you see, are central to the way it is that we process our world. The question is, how are you digesting your world? And how can both Ayurveda and Jyotish work together to help you to process your world? So I believe that it can be said that Agni, or this ability to transform, is at the core of Ayurveda. The ability to digest food, water, air, but also experience. And the better we digest, the more that we have what is called ojas, the end result of those 7 tissues process Okay, like a chain reaction, it moves until a fine essence is made called our ojas, which turns to our immunity, but it is also our aura. It is our ability to shine. Right? And the more that we digest well in this world, the things that we experience, what we put in, the better that shine. It is said the Buddha had 50 miles of aura. People would know that the Buddha was in the area simply because of the aura. The question is, when we are in the presence of a true guru, and somehow all of our problems drop away. Somehow we have clarity. Somehow when the teacher is then speaking, we understand clearly. But then when we're not in the presence, somehow it's not as clear. Right? So the question becomes, how good are we at digesting our world? Are we digesting it, but are we bogged down with any of ama, undigested material, you see, either physically or mentally? And the more that we understand Ayurveda, and the more that we also apply this with an understanding of the unfolding of our karma, then we will be better fit, you see. Because if we don't, where there is more ama, or that undigested material, be it physical or mental, what I would say is it gives us, it's the food behind our action. It is, if we're able to burn clearly, the more clearly we're able to burn, then we're able to think better. And if we're able to think better, we're able to act more, hopefully more dharmically. And therefore, you see, it becomes a matter of choice, right? So everything affects the choices that we make. And our choices become our karmic legacy. So Ayurveda is very strong at helping to balance the body and the mind. But we also need a way to manage the karmic unfolding, which creates the body-mind according to Charaka. We need the knowledge of time. We need a map of karma. And in this way, the knowledge of time, called Kala Shastra, this is another name for Jyotish, Kala Shastra. And in this model, the sun and the moon are the way. Through light, we tell time. Time and space, as Einstein would say, they are the same. They are one. Space, time, time, space. And so it is the sun and the moon, the light of the sun and the moon, through which we run, if you will, the cosmic clock that's going all the time, right, is how we run our lives. So if we understand time, we understand how to align with the greater cosmos. That alignment is part of what you could call, again, swasta. Right? So this great clock is in the sky and is constantly, of course, moving. And movement is how we know life. Life is consciousness, and consciousness is the movement of thought. So the transformation of the self from the small to the large, or to understand that we are part of it, to live this, you see, the rishis said, well, we need to understand time, and we need to make time maps. We need to have a design behind all of this, you see. And this is where our calendars, as I was saying, come from. But this is also what communities, cultures have used, of course, to glue it all together, to make sense of it all. And the rituals and ceremonies that go along with it, the almanacs that we even use in the West, that the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, the founding father, right, made all his money on what? An almanac full of astrology. So time is the field within which all past and present action take root. And therefore, it is, of course, super important to understand as much as we can how to look at it, how to see it, and how to accept it. Right? So next topic I just want to say is, of course, Jataka Jyotish. This is natal astrology. As I said, it's a map of karma. And it's a big topic, and I just want to also bridge this a little bit more with Ayurveda and say, how does Jyotish possibly help, okay, with Ayurveda? Well, When I pose these questions to some senior students or students of Ayurveda who are going to be practitioners, and I said, well, look, interfacing the two, because there's an understanding now of time and phases, you see, different chapters and subchapters and sub-subchapters of time and so forth. We could look and say, oh, is it an up or a downswing in someone's health? Is the situation acute or is it chronic? When will there be relief? I'm not saying this could be done every single time with everyone's horoscope, but a lot can be done. A prakriti also can be seen. Besides what is, when people take the pulse and say, this is your Ayurvedic prakriti and so forth, well, there's also a Jyotishical prakriti, which may be similar, but it also may be a little different. Is what is going on hereditary? What is the person's mental disposition, the timing of those states? Relationship and sexuality, what a huge piece of our health, right? That is, right? And Jyotish is excellent at addressing that. Are you wasting your prana? Well, see, when you go to help someone in Ayurveda, sometimes people don't want to be helped, or sometimes they're in a situation which, as I said, up or downswing, you need to know how to use your energy. Will they or can they follow your advice? Or more specifically, which dosha, which one of those humors, okay, is predominant in their vikriti, their present state, right? And then which dhatus are involved? Well, that's something we're going to briefly speak to, and when to give the medicine. So like this last one, the little piece, when to give the medicine. Well, that's a big one, right? And can be done either without a natal horoscope. It can be done just by muhurta. You see, just by saying, oh, I'm going to pick the correct day of the week, you see, as per that the sun, moon, Mars, all of them rule different days of the week. That's also Jyotish. All right. So now I'm going to launch into a little Jyotish proper. And so for those of you who don't know anything, you could possibly go back and have a look at this, but it will probably, some of it fly past you. But the essentials is that you're going to be looking at what's called a North Indian style chart. And for today, what you would need to know is that the houses, there are 12 of them, and they start here, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way around to the 12th. And we're going to be very interested in the 6th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house. Now, in a North Indian style chart, as you can see over here, the number that is in there, that's not the house number, that's a constellation number. See, 1 is Aries, 2 is Taurus, 3 is Gemini, like that. Now, what I've said over here is that strength and weakness of the planets are key to determining whether a person's horoscope will promise resistance or vulnerability in health or any area of life, right? And so planets, just like human beings, can have different assets or deficits, right, as per their environment. And so the name of the game, without getting into, there's no way to teach Jyotish in a short period of time, but the name of the game is to understand both what house that a particular planet may be in, as well as what is the strength of that planet. What does that planet do? All right. Now, generally, the ascendant or the lagna, the ascendant's the first house, okay, is the that's the key factor, in which is usually the most important to determine whether that is strong or whether that is weak. Okay, and so it's just said here, each graha will be located in a house, and the location and condition of a dhatu that it represents will be there supported or obstructed. That's where we're going to go. We're going to have a look at some of those dhatus or tissues for those that know a little bit about Jyotish. Otherwise, just listen in between. So it's there for the record. The planets and the constellations also take on the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha qualities. And as you can see them here, the hot planets, Sun is Pitta, Mars is Pitta, and so forth. Jupiter's Kapha, Saturn is Vata. And this list is something that is pretty standard. Most people will see it in this way. In terms of the constellations, which would be Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, are fire signs, okay, and therefore they're Pitta. earth, vata, air signs, sama, meaning balanced, and then the water signs are kapha. Some people have a different opinion about this. I personally adhere to these classifications. All right. Now, what I want to do a little demonstration with, it has to do with the sapta dhatu, or the 7 tissues of the body. So these 7 tissues, as you can see by the diagram, prana and ojas are at the top. Prana is the body's vital breath, vital essence, and ojas is the container, our immunity, the container within which that holds it. It really, in that way, is the fuel, the super essence fuel of the body. But you see, when we eat, then the first tissue, okay, the rasa dhatu, or the plasma, is formed. But it is what? It is light. It is agni. Right? It is that transformative principle that turns that into red blood, that into muscle, that into fat, bone, nerve, and finally, then we get up to the sex organ of the reproductive tissue, you see? And then after that, then this final product is made. So it can be very interesting to see in a person and through a horoscope, if one of these happens to be working under stress or is vitiated, right, has had trouble, right? Because indeed, it can cause trouble to the ones that are around it as well. And as you can see, these tissues have a planet, right, that corresponds to each one of them. Rasa is moon, Rakta Mars, Mamsa Saturn, Meda Jupiter, Asti Sun, Maja Mercury, and the reproductive Shukra and Artava is Venus. Again, I have seen some people take different parts of this, because different Shastra, for example, some will say that Asti, the osseous tissue or the bone tissue, also is Saturn, right? And some will say that Mamsa or muscle is also Mars, okay? So there are some variants there, right? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look and see if if a planet in a horoscope falls in the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th. These are called the Triksthana, the 3 places, or the Dusthana includes the 3rd, but the Dusthana, Duhu, meaning the difficult bhavas. These are places, think of them in a horoscope like an eddy. You know, in a river, you have a river flow, and then on the sides, you see there's a place where it's not flowing. It's not flowing as well. And therefore, when a planet, a graha, can get put into one of these places, indeed, it might cause it to be vitiated. So that's what we said here. Planet located in 6, 8, or 12 can be disconnected and can act like a blind spot in the chart. Right? The dhatu that planet represents can be disconnected and isolated and vulnerable, especially if it is the only one in 6 or 8 or 12. So I've picked Ms. Angelina Jolie. She actually has a very nice horoscope in so many ways, and she's done some exceptionally good work in the world. She had a hard start in the early part of life, and she's been through some tough times recently as well. But what I wanted to, in her horoscope, to point out is that when we look at these 3 places, we can see that Saturn is there in what is her 12th house. So what I do is I would go over here and look to see Saturn, which dhatu, okay, that's Mamsa. Well, Mamsa is the muscle tissue of the body. And so this is going to mean that in some way or another, at least to start with, I can look and I can say there's going to be a tendency for that tissue to what? Work. You might hypertrophy. There might be too little or it might be too much, you see? And in her case, there has been often on in her life a tendency to go thin, right? And to also lose muscle tissue in her body, which if you look at the photo, I know it's small down there, but you can see that there is this tendency in her. Now the Saturn here also is aspecting onto this group of planets, because Saturn looks, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it looks here, 8, 9, and Saturn aspects 10 away. So Saturn's actually looking at this group, which holds the moon who is the lord of her chart. She has a Cancer ascendant, and that means moon is the lord of that. And so Saturn's also influencing the lord of her chart. Mars, who also is a hot planet, 1, 2, 3, 4, it also looks at Saturn. So Saturn and Mars are in, quote, mutual aspect. They're looking at each other. And both of them are also, for medical reasons, afflicting the moon, who's the lord of the chart. So when I see this, I can start to put 2 and 2 together, right? I can say, oh, look, there's going to be a tendency for the muscle, for the Mamsa Dhatu to vitiate. Now I might say, well, which way do I think it's going to go? Well, when I see Saturn on the moon, I think that is going to pull it more in the direction of depletion, because Saturn is the Vata planet, the Vata Karaka. As well as Mars and Saturn, when they join or in mutual aspect with each other, they give a dynamic tension in the person's life. They have the person drive. It's one of these, what one of my teachers called driving with the brakes on. You see, it creates a lot of force, but also a lot of resistance. Personally, I've found this combination also to mean that there can be autoimmune reactions. But the point is that it means that the person will have a lot of personal drive and motivation and movement in them. Now, on top of this, then I could also look at the Saturn and see that it is the lord of her 7th house and say, oh, could it be that partnerships or marriage also play into the reason the Dhatu, the Mamsa in her body, maybe it is in fact stress from that, you see? Now, with this, of course, I can also take the 12th house. For those of you who know some Jyotish, know the 12th house represents also sleep, right? Unconsciousness, leaving the body. And I can say that then Saturn is the planet that represents Vata, right, is going to cause there to be a lack of sleep. And then I put that together with Mars and the moon, and I say, aha, this is going to be a person, the mind's going to start to be overactive, right? And this will cause stress. And this will cause what? The body to lose part of its muscle system. Right? Now, she also, I believe in 2016, had Bell's palsy, which, you know, is one could say it's a neurological complaint, but it causes the wasting, you see, of the muscles in the face like that. So, of course, there's many different things that can be said about her and, you know, her life and so forth. But what I would say is that this brings up a certain point of what I would just call vulnerability to be explored. Right? Now, for those of you who are feeling sorry for her right now, know that she had, because of this powerful Jupiter in her horoscope, because this is the lord of the sign that it's in, this very powerful Jupiter is all over so many pieces of her horoscope, and it serves as a foundation for her that gives her a certain level of capacity to bounce back as well. All right, let's see. I don't know that I have room for one more of these, but I will just quickly take this one just as an example, and won't go through it all, but just to say, here's another example of someone who has multiple planets in 6, 8, and 12. What do I do with that? I look to the condition of the planet. In this case of Sun, Ketu, Jupiter, and Rahu, the Sun is the one that is the weakest. You would have to know where they're weak and strong, but Sun is in Libra. That's its place of debilitation. No, now that I'm looking at it, not only that, but for those of you who know some Jyotish, it is at 10 degrees. This is just past the maximum point of debilitation. On top of it, Sun is in a sign of Venus, and Venus is also debilitated as the lord of the 1st house. So she's a Venus-ruled person. In any case, I would look at this and say, Sun, there it is, and Asti Dhatu, the bone, the osseous tissue of the body. And this was a person who, for a period of time here in the Rahu period, suffered more severely with osteoporosis. Right? And so there was some breaks that came along with that as well. And again, when looking at it, because Saturn is, again, the planet that represents Vata, because 1, 2, 3, it looks on this, I can then say, oh, it is in fact a Vata-oriented bone problem like this. And again, for those of you who are doing Jyotisha a little bit more, you could look at Saturn and see that it's in place of the stomach. And also say that this is due to low acidity, the reason that the person can't absorb in their body and so forth. And we could keep going. With Rahu in the 12th, I also would say it affects the sleep, to put it in a, in a very simple way. Now, what I just did, I'm going to stop soon because we need some time for some Q&A and so forth. But what I'm hoping that as I walk through that to show you was that Ayurveda, not to simply launch into what you would call medical astrology, right? But to use Ayurveda and Jyotish simultaneously, we don't ever have to leave the container, you see. And there's a big difference in that than there is in trying to apply things, I think, what I would call allopathically, right? But the idea is that in our journey, the using of the two together helps us with our free will. Because when one understands a situation better, when one has knowledge of something in time, and one can say, hey, you know, not to worry, I believe that things will in fact improve in 2017, you know, that kind of thing, right? When you look ahead. I've had so many clients say to me, you know, I didn't like the idea that something may here continue, but in the back of my mind, it was such a relief because I knew that this wouldn't last forever. That is such a solve so many times for all of us. We all want to know some of that. Okay, good. So that's it. If you guys want to learn a little Jyotish, I might as well put a plug in here. I think I have one there. Yeah, if you guys want to learn some Jyotish. Every January, I do a foundation course, which starts, I have a 3-year program that runs. And so if you guys are interested in that, it's 3 years, 2 semesters every year. So thank you so much for that. And let's get to some questions. Okay, thank you, Paula. I saw someone down there. Okay, so now let me get to bring up some Q&A here. Let's see. So the questions, it seems there were just 2. So one was really just a statement. Someone said, I love the connection between the planets and the dhatus. And indeed, the planets and the dhatus have always been interconnected, and in this way, understanding the body as well as how it interfaces with the mind has always been the terrain of Jyotish. So let me see here. Are you planning to do a course on medical astrology? Certainly not this year. I have been toying around with the idea again because it has been probably 5-6 years, or I don't know, since I was usually teaching this live. And I believe when I did it before, we did what were 2, 3, or 4, 3 or 4 day weekends. So if I were to teach that online, then if you get on my mailing list on VedicTraditions.com, if you get on my mailing list, then certainly whatever I am teaching, I will put out as a notice to everyone. So let's see. I think that's it, unless there are other questions that I didn't see.
I'm sure that Vladimir here has either an observation or question, so I'll let him go first, and then I also have one. But take it away, Vladimir.
Well, It is very comprehensive what you were presenting about the light and how the light is manifested in manifestations through us being embodied in time and space, and how time and space relate. There is something very mysterious about Jyotisha. It's the only science which is actually was inherited from the Vedic sciences in the more Vedic terms as manifestation of the divine in nature. And the devatas standing behind nakshatras and the powers standing behind grahas, and their influences in the moment of your birth, of your momentum, whatever it is actually fascinating, because it was traced back to this mapping of the bigger time and space. It was a mapping of time. Space became a map of time, and people could see this presence of these forces, and they traced back the regularity and the meaning of their influence on their lives. It's an amazing science of psychology. It's a kind of psychology
Oh,
of
the ultimate.
universals. Yeah. And that is
Yeah.
something mind-boggling. Whenever I hear this, everything is related: physical, mental, vital structure. Everything is inherited from cosmos. Definitely. Where else from we should inherit it? Yeah? All the materials is taken from the cosmos in a particular fashion, which is cognizable. And
Order. Yeah.
yeah, there is an order of things. Amazing.
Huge, deep, intrinsic order.
Mm.
It is us, and we are that. There's no separation between the two.
So beautiful. Yes. Every
And
time
that I would say to anyone who is even putting their toe into this pond,
Mm.
that we all have it as our birthright.
Mm.
Each one of us knows this. It's inherent in every single person. And that's the reason that when I said Ayurveda is the mother of all healing, is because it's made not to be a highfalutin thing that only certain people can learn. It is what I call grandma wisdom. You see? Yeah. And really Jyotish in the same ways is always been shared and continue to be shared, and it's an open book, right? In terms of its innate knowledge. Now, a lot of the practitioners, who this was, handed down, it's an oral tradition handed down, you see. And of course, some of those families would hold some secrets, you see, around how to do certain things within their family because it was their livelihood. But Jyotish itself, the essence of it, Vedanga Jyotish, Muhurta Jyotish, and all of this is the core and the essence of the culture from South Asia that is so developed, and that it is, again, as you said, it's awe-inspiring. But please, Radha, you were going to say
I
something.
was just going to say you got a few more questions in the meantime.
Oh, okay. All
To
right. Well,
take a look.
so let's have a look. Let's see here. Okay, so I think I don't know which came first, so I'll start at the top. Do you look at the transiting planets as well for health issues? Indeed, we do. But in terms of the transit, see, Western astrology has, in terms of transits, are used heftily because in Western astrology, they don't have the timing system called dashas, right? And so transits are used there, but they are used very heavily also in Jyotish. So the answer is yes, but we will start with what planetary period they're running and what sub-period they're running. The next question was, can you explain how Ojas becomes Tejas? Well, you see, in this way, Ojas is, let's use an analogy. So if we have a lamp, like an oil lamp, you see, one of those old oil lamps that you would put a glass on the top and it had a screw that you could turn the flame up and down, you see. Well, if we think of Ojas as being the fuel within the container, then the tejas, you see, the way it is that it burns, how high that tejas is up or not, okay, will determine how well, okay, the ojas is maintained. If it's turned up too high, smoke will come, ama will pervade in the system, right? Why? Because also more prana, okay, will come in, right, to feed that fire, and that will also dry the ojas, right? So ojas, in that sense, becomes tejas when it is balanced all the time. Of course, it is the source, it is the fuel from which they, and all three of them, work simultaneously. So let's see here. The next question was, thank you for the enlightening presentation. Well, thank you. Your January course, what months are the two segments? Well, it goes from January to May, and then we start again in August and go August to December. So it's 18 weeks for each semester. Next question, if you see an affliction in the chart, can you also see what a possible remedy is? Yes, sometimes, but not always. On that one, what I'd say to you is that has to do with the nature, the fixity, the level of fixity in the karma, whether how drud or adrud, fixed or unfixed the particular karma is. But the idea in Jyotisha is that knowledge, of course, is important. The understanding of what is going on is there, but the idea, of course, is that upaya, or remedial measures, different forms of mantra, for example, mantra, yantra, tantra, these types of things are applied in order to try to ameliorate the situation. The question of whether what is done, how much is done, will depend upon the severity of the affliction, like that. All right, let's see, one more here. How insomnia and sleep apnea related with the dhatu and graha? Oh, big question. Maybe too technical for what we're talking about, but the thing is this, what I would say to that is that often with insomnia, with sleep apnea, at least I have seen that there's a relationship to the moon, and the way it is that, see, the moon represents the rasa dhatu, but moon for rasa dhatu, Mercury for majja dhatu, right? But you see, the planets as well, they're not just representative of dhatus. You see, they also represent organs. So depending upon the individual, like I was going to say in terms of insomnia, well, it can come in many different forms. Some people, they have nervous insomnia. A lot of people have digestive insomnia. They're not aware of it. A lot of people have trouble with their liver. That keeps them awake, wakes them early, okay, in the night. So that also could be rakta dhatu, depending, you see. With sleep apnea, I would usually go back to, again, moon, which does relate to rasa dhatu, and then back to Mercury in terms of majja dhatu. But that's, again, a little more complicated, and I don't want to try to fit it all into one basket. All right, and then last but not least, when looking at Angelina Jolie's chart, what would indicate from Jyotish the vein on her forehead? Where would one find the meaning of that in a chart? The forehead vein. Well, that's a very specific question. So what I would say to that is when we see veins in someone like that, it's usually a signal of vata or pitta. Usually in the head, it represents someone who has a lot of drive and forcefulness in them, right? Because we all know that if you strain, you'll see the veins come out on your head. Now, if the person who's asking that was asking for some other reason, then I am not sure, okay? I would just say, I don't know. But I would also say it's never something I've ever looked at in a horoscope, but I was just making this supposition, you know, and saying that it's likely, when I look at it, I would say it's likely to be because of Mars in her particular case. And I say that because, you see, often people will get migraines because of flaring of the vessels in the head, right? And this puts pressure on nerve, So maybe that way with her, but on that one, I don't know.
And Stephen, I don't know if you have just another minute or two. I would love to
Oh, sure.
squeeze a question in here.
Please go ahead.
As you were speaking about Ayurveda, you spoke a lot about the body and the emotions and the mind, and the same with Jyotish and the Vedic birth chart. So my question is, with these two sciences, is there also some insights from a spiritual perspective on the spiritual health of an individual, or the likely spiritual inclination or path that one may take? Do either of these two sciences address the soul or the spirit of the individual?
Big question. The answer is, of course, yes, they do. Now, because Ayurveda has never been divorced from the spiritual heritage of a culture that embraces the idea, this Vedic vision, the idea of oneness, of wholeness. See, long before there was, quote, holistic medicine. See, this idea of being holistic is a modern term, right? Because it was always that way. So the theme of spirituality from the perspective of Ayurveda is interwoven into the very daily practice, the dinacharya, right? The daily activities, which include practice, right? Which include devotion, cooking, you see, because each day in the home, fresh cooked food would be offered on the altar. And so the idea of cooking each day and having fresh prana flowing into the body for the self as well as to the deity, right, invokes a very strong connection with spirituality. But also, as I was speaking to earlier, the idea that we need to keep our body as our temple, and we need to keep the temple in order. We need to keep it clean. We need to keep it working in our unique constitution, right? And when that happens, then we have the ability to move upward. We have the ability to see higher, to expand, because as we all know, if you have a cut foot, right, and you're hobbling around, you're looking where? Down, so to speak. You feel the pain, right? Now, sometimes that, rises us up. We begin to look at our mortality and these kind of things. But Ayurveda is steeped in this. Jyotish is even more steeped in the connection to spirituality because it enables us to see through a certain lens, and one of the, through a certain lens of what we are best suited for or who we are as an individual, and also to help to see us, to see how much sattva, rajas, and tamas is within us. And how we can work with that sattva, rajas, and tamas. But also some adept Jyotishis, such as my Guruji, Mantriji's brother back in the last century, was able, because he did intense sadhana that almost caused his leg to be removed because of what the practice that was done. He was able to gain the siddhi of understanding one's ishta devata, where one had the spirituality that one had followed in past lives, so that then one could pick it up, you see, and get to exactly where one needed to be without wasting time, without being drawn off course. Now, that is something that for a master Jyotishi and someone who was a yogi and who underwent months and months of a terrifying sadhana to gain this particular siddhi, this particular accomplishment, right? It's no small business, right? However, spirituality, I find, at least for myself anyway, maybe I've just got a hard head, but I need Jyotish to constantly remind me every single day around how karma works. And the more I do that, the more I've seen students work with Jyotish, it chips away at this, at an understanding that I am part of a totality. the totality is me, and that is all rolling and unfolding in time. And how beautiful and sweet that life can be, even when we have the hard knocks, right? Why? Because I've seen the hard knocks come, and I've seen it in so many people, and I've also seen what? The time frame, right? And understanding time is to understand space, and then understand time and space is to understand consciousness. And that, in the end, is, to my mind, the essence of spirituality, which is to know that we are that. I am that. Like that.
That am I. Thank you. That's very beautifully said. We have a few more questions, but we are a bit out of time. I'm sure if you look at that chat box, you've been getting so many compliments. Amazing
Oh, good. Well, thank all
presentation,
of you.
terrific
Thank all of you.
webinar. We are really grateful, Stephen, to have you here and to be able to host you. And we really thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and with the attendees. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Rade. Such a pleasure. Thank you. And Vladimir, such an
Thank you,
incredible, I want
Stephen.
to say to everyone, Vladimir is an unbelievable teacher. So good. I have been learning with Vladimir many years ago for a long time. Incredible Sanskritist, incredible knowledge that he has around Veda and other, a vast array of knowledge and so forth. So if you haven't
Thank you,
experienced Vladimir live, you must. And by the way, also, Rade has a beautiful book on the nakshatra. I know she won't say it, but I have it over here on my shelf, right? And oftentimes I'll go grab her book, and look in it,
Yeah, here it is.
There it is there,
Well,
yes.
this is actually where Vladimir and I first met, was me looking for somebody that could help me with the Rig Veda a bit more on some of these godheads of the nakshatras. So it was
Yeah.
through Penny and her referral to Vladimir that we first met and started working together. And today we're still working together. How wonderful is
And
this
what a
life,
beautiful
huh?
thing it is. Yeah, thank you guys
Yeah.
for all, I mean,
Well,
not only for this, but for what you do. So
yeah.
what a beautiful dharmic path you're on,
Same
and
to
we
you,
will
Stephen.
remain in contact.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Namaste.
All right.
Thanks again.
Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.